welcome everybody to Conversations in American Democracy. We're going to dispense with the usual order of things in our constitutional minute and executive orders and so on, because we have a special guest. But I do want to remind everybody at 4 o'clock this afternoon, Randy Fine is scheduled to speak to a group at the Craig Flagler, whatever the funeral home is on South Old Kings Road, and a group of us are going to be there, expect to be there to hold signs and so on, and protest his being there. I don't know if we want to protest his very existence, but we want to protest against him. And that's interestingly, will he be the Republican nominee against which a Democrat may run? And we've been in touch with a Democrat who may run against him. He may be here next week. We don't know, but certainly his policies are worthy of having us speak out against those policies. So, I don't know what an oy vey, soy vey is. You have to be from New York and you have to know a little Yiddish. But so we begin with the question. How many of you can name all of the Democrats, registered Democrats, who serve in elected offices currently in our county? Mm-hmm. Only one person? Okay.
I think there's only one.
Yeah.
There is only one.
Okay. There is only one, to my knowledge. And that is school board member Jane Ruddy. I don't know what type of wrong.
There's another one,
Jane Ruddy.
Ralph Lightfoot.
You know what? Is he on the mosquito? I thought he lost on it. He was on the mosquito. On mosquito. Yeah, a mosquito control board. Okay. And so Janie has been kind enough to come and chat with us. We've talked about many issues, and I'll turn it over to her again with the understanding that there's some things that she cannot speak about, so please be respectful of that. And do you want to begin, or do you want me to ask you about what's wrong with having the government pay for kids to go to any school they want to?
Yeah, so I'm excited to be here. I love whenever we have community members who are really involved in our system as well as our schools and are active in really making our community and our society better for everybody. So I applaud you guys for taking such an initiative. And so, yeah, today when I chat as a school board member with the Florida statutes around school board communication, outside of a meeting, a school board meeting, I cannot represent the wishes or intentions of the board. Everything that I share today represent my personal opinion, beliefs, ideas. A school board can only act in concert with each other and make decisions in concert with each other. If there are any outstanding items for which we are to be voting or deciding on, I also can't release my opinion on those, because then it would be seen as influencing the other school board members outside of the public meetings that we have. So with that, the question of having the government pay for schools, and I'm assuming some of that is related to the voucher program, because others could argue that technically the government does also subsidize higher education in the form of some of those loans, federal direct loans, lower interest rates. So actually I see, in my opinion, both of those areas being under attack. Number one, there is a movement to reduce the availability of loans for students who want to attain higher education. And in fact, we hear a lot in the last 5 years of how college is really a waste of money. I never think you can go wrong in bettering yourself. You know, for whatever reason, there's that movement, and the current administration is trying to push people away from taking those loans and making it harder, if they can't find a job, to make those repayment plans. And, you know, as taxpayers, one benefit is you can't even go bankrupt on those loans. People have to pay them back, right? Now, so that's one form that we do subsidize education in some form because it's for the betterment of our society. What the difference is that it's optional, right? People are choosing to go to college. It's a loan that they're going to pay back and then some with interest. The difference with the family empowerment and the scholarship programs is it's taking taxpayer funds that are traditionally used for public education and diverting it to business interests, because those private schools in K-12, majority of them are for-profit institutions. And so many people, when we raise this issue, say, well, what's the matter with me just taking the money that I submit into my taxes that would normally pay for my student and taking it somewhere else? If that were the case, probably most people would have less than an issue. However, especially in Florida, where we pay sales tax, but not local tax, not state tax, and we do enjoy a very low property tax rate, the portion that you as a citizen who have children in the schools pay for your child alone is far below the minimum $8,000 voucher that you're receiving. And that's per year per child, right? So if I'm going to only receive back what I put into the system, I would probably argue that a lot of us maybe would not have that issue. But it's far and exceeding what those folks who are participating in the voucher program are actually paying into the system. Additionally, you have to think about when you're investing money into a program, it usually is more cost efficient when you don't have things scattered, right? When we're putting the funds into one solid program and we don't have these divested interests. We're now in a situation where we're having public schools, charter schools, vouchers, and those vouchers going to private schools, and those private schools not required to have the same accountability as public schools. And so I have heard some stories of folks who enroll their children in these voucher schools that are for-profit institutions, and they're given a wonderful tour. They hear and see accredited teachers writing the lessons and this wonderful environment. But then when they notice that their children are not making progress, they go in and find out that they have one certified teacher perhaps who essentially is stamping the lessons, and that they're really maybe part-time individuals who maybe not even have a college degree or are trained in the art of teaching those children. And so I almost equate that to a voucher mill, right? Where when you don't have that accountability for the money that we're paying into it, and if their incentive is to make that money, it would be all well and good if they had data to prove that their outcomes are equal or better than the public school. But that is not happening. And so you as taxpayers have a right to know the outcomes of what your money is being used for, especially something like education, which is an investment, right? It's an investment in our community and our future. In addition, the voucher program is very loose in allowing the use of those funds beyond even for-profit business schools. Those private institutions can be religious schools. They could have, certain beliefs that don't necessarily align with that community or the taxpayer base. And there's been a long history of separating church and state, and to the point that many of those religious institutions don't even pay tax. and in trying to keep that line pretty separate. And so, I'm not opposed if you want your child to receive religious education. However, we have places of worship. They have Sunday school offerings. The purpose of public education is to prepare the skills for an intelligent, democratic base to participate in our democracy, contribute to society, and live their best potential. Those elements of religious pursuits and interests, those are outside of the responsibility of us as taxpayers to nurture. That's a family decision. Beyond that, what the argument often is, well, as a parent, I should have the choice, and if I'm not happy with public school, then I should have an alternative. And I am not necessarily opposed to that. If we have a failing public school system, I never want a child to be stuck in a school system that isn't working for them. And so there have been a long history, I think since the 90s, of offerings to take that child from a school that is not performing to another public school, and allow that flexibility to a school that is performing, or allowing some of that choice, even to the point of requiring that school district to transport those students to that school. So we already have that choice within the public school system. The difference here is now they're taking taxpayer funds beyond the tax that they individually pay, and they're placing that money into institutions that do not have the accountability for their outcomes. And that money is technically funded in excess of what the public schools receive for that child. So if I, as a school district, educate David, and we get $7,500 for that student, the funding for the vouchers that a parent might receive is what's called above the line. So when they receive that money, it's actually more than what we would receive, because when we receive that money, there are certain funds that must be spent in different categories, and so what actually goes down to impact that student and what we can spend on teacher salaries is very different. And whereas they have that money and they have 100% autonomy on where they use it in terms of curriculum. And we also have an infrastructure to support. So when you're paying vouchers equitable to that funding for a public education child, we have schools. That FPC does not care how many students are in that building. We still need to repair that air conditioning unit that I think it was 2 years ago, is $2 million, something of that nature. We have reporting requirements that we have to pay for. We have safe schools statutes that we have to abide by, and we need to pay for those items regardless of the number of students in that school. So when people don't understand, well, hey, I don't understand how it's defunding public schools if I'm taking that money that I paid into the system and just choosing to go elsewhere. There's an entire infrastructure that will erode, and then what will happen is we won't even have that option for the students that really want public education. Sorry, very long answer.
And by the way, we're very informal and very relaxed, so again,
I have a question.
okay, one or
Yes, ma'am.
two, and
Not trying to dumb this down, but for me, I need to take a little step back. I'm not sure the difference between what private and charter and, I thought that was all one thing.
Oh, no, they're
Private,
different.
charter and voucher, you said, so
Sure.
I'm lost now.
So
I
when
just know
we-
they all take money, but.
Yeah. When we say voucher, that's a ubiquitous term where we're just kind of banking it all in. But so that's the money that a family can choose to take with them that does not go to the public school system. So they apply for it. And, we're having, as a state, to pay additional administrative costs to run the step-up agency that organizes the distribution of those funds. So when we say voucher, that is not an education institution. That's just the money that we're saying, and is inclusive of, those options. So private is when that is an entity that is completely separate from the umbrella of the school district. So that may be a religious school. That may be an online school. There is a huge movement now to have, there's a big business model about putting your student online with AI for 2 hours a day, and that's the education they receive. So that is a business. There's also, private, where they are for profit. So you might hear like Compass Learning, or what's the big one that there is a gentleman from Florida, actually, Ken Griffith, who is established this in New York and is very eager to bring that model down here. I can't remember the name, but anyway, it's like a CVS. It's a business, right? And so that's kind of the different private and those business models.
Charter was a private school.
No, so a charter is something that came really before these vouchers, where in our community, Imagine Schools is a charter. They are essentially run by an external agency. They don't have to necessarily comply with all the statutes the public school does. However, they receive their funding from the public schools. And so, for example, they can choose to not educate a child. A family can come in and say, I want my Sally to go into 3rd grade here. If they really wanted to, they could take a placement test and decide, no, we don't want to educate your child. We have had where they will start at a charter school, and then when they receive certain disciplinary issues, they then say, you're no longer allowed to be here, and then they go back to the public school. So there's a lot of back and forth. So there are certain requirements in the school system in sharing those funds with the charter school. The charter school doesn't have to, let's say, use the curriculum we use. They don't have to abide by statutes that are set forth, let's say, like student-teacher ratios. I'm not saying that Imagine doesn't. Again, this is just a broad element. They're also often for-profit. They could be run and organized by a private entity, where they're saying, okay, we're going to take this taxpayer money and we're going to apply it, and we're going to run our school the way we want. And the ideal is that they will have leftover monies to be able to fund that business. So they don't have to pay the teachers the same rate. Those teachers are not part of the Florida retirement system. But that's different from charter to charter. I am aware of a charter school in St. Augustine where they actually pay their teachers more than the school system does. Here, our Imagine charter school, they are paid, at least initially, less than what our public school system teachers are.
Mike was next, and then Kathy.
Well, it can be said honestly that by setting up the voucher system and making it so high, that's a bribe by the state to get parents to put their kids in private schools. It's a bribe, because otherwise you would just take the tax money that the parents were paying into the system, take that tax money and give it to the schools. But they have to incentivize parents, so that's why they're paying more. You can say that honestly. Mm-hmm. You could also say honestly that it is not a goal of the state of Florida or anybody else to educate those kids. It is a goal to get them the hell out of public schools where they turn out to be loud little liberals. You see, I mean, there's just no doubt. That's what the purpose is. It is to break the public school system, which they've been trying to break for years. Now they're breaking the Department of Education, and that'll help break up the public school system. Because they use that term, well, the public school system is failing. It is not failing. In this town, the public schools have a higher rating than Imagine.
That is correct.
See? So you gotta see it for what it is. This is not a financial issue. It's not a educational issue. It is, in simple words, a way of breaking down the public school system.
You know, I love that you bring this up because in the end, it's like, okay, this is what we're dealing with, but why, right? So that's where my brain goes. Why would a relatively fiscally conservative group want to essentially run two different systems that are costing them more right now? So when I think about it, you know, usually there are some reasons in terms of, well, how are we going to manage a particular balanced budget? So when you think about what happened post-COVID, we had an influx of people come to Florida, right?
Yes.
Well, our population has been increasing. If there are certain interests that do not want to invest in infrastructure in public schools, how do we ensure that we don't have to build more schools? So even though they're paying this voucher, that's still cheaper than perhaps having to build multi-million-dollar schools and campuses, right? So I see that as one way that they're trying to solve for how do we increase our population, because again, with our low property tax rate, no state and local income taxes, the way that they generate their revenue is sales tax. And so you need people and you need people buying things in order to generate that revenue. So it is in their best interest to attract more and more folks. But if we attract those folks and have to spend it on multi-million-dollar school facilities, well, then that's a wash, right? The other place where I see some of this is it was very interesting to me because I taught in the classroom when it was Common Core. That made sense to me, to be honest, because if I live in Idaho or I live in California or I live in New York, in 8th grade, we should all know what every kid is supposed to be learning, right? Now it's completely broken away from that, where the vouchers also can cover homeschooling. You can choose to not even teach your child the standards, right? So it's gone a completely opposite way. So I think sometimes just in terms of, you know, folks where they want this kind of local autonomy, they see it as a way to gain that control back, right? Because they thought that Common Core was indoctrinating students. So I think it will swing back a little bit, but you're right. In essence, I feel it is an incentive in order to take students out of public education because they don't want to spend the money for the schools. But I think there's also a second reason, and it is a longer term plan reason. When you look at who the backers, who are the financial interests in turning charters, turning to technology to educate our students. There are the Walton family, there's another AI tech person, Ken Griffith, right? Multi-million, if not billionaires, right? So, well, if you are going to be just as successful teaching students using textbooks and, you know, a minimal level of software and get those results, well, all those folks who have invested or are connected or want to build a business off that are not going to be prosperous, right? So they have backed this movement in order to essentially turn education into a business, and that's another way that Florida makes our money, right? Besides the sales tax, our taxes on businesses. And so I see that as a model, since the far right conservatives feel that capitalism is the answer for everything, that they're thinking that capitalism is the answer to educating our children. But in the end, you see businesses succeed and fail. You see businesses take people's pensions away, right? I don't disagree with capitalism. I think you need competition. I think it helps fuel innovation, but it should be a balance, not pure capitalism. I don't want to walk by people who are destitute on the street or starving or can't afford health care, right? We want to have that bottom net. And so part of that is also an extreme set of people who don't want any money going to any social services. So, they have an organized voice that is making those changes. And Florida has been the kind of first to try this out. And in my, work outside of the school board, I've seen this across the country, where now Ohio, now Texas. In Texas, they're going to give a family, if you have a child who has disabilities, and they have disabilities to the extent that they need a para, so an additional professional to help, or additional technology or resources, they're going to pay up to $35,000 for that child to remove them from the public schools. So several states are following suit with this model. And it is a gamble that I personally don't feel is worth it. We're gambling with our children's ability to thrive and succeed and be ready for the future.
Kathy was next, then Kurt, and then we'll go to
I had
another one.
one real quick thing and then a serious question. One was, are Montessori schools a charter school or a
That's a good question.
private school, or where do they?
Yeah, Montessori is one of those terms that has become both a business and a form of teaching. So you might hear where even a teacher in the public school can say, I subscribe with the Montessori method, which means, especially in the younger grades, instead of sitting students in individual seats and kind of, the old time way of teaching, they teach through play and experience, things of that nature. And there are so Montessori, that's like a name brand of that type of school, which was not part of the public school, but the methodology that they use has actually made it way into even the way that some teachers choose to deliver that curriculum.
Do you think that this move to pay homeschool, I have a real prejudice against homeschools, I'll be upfront about that, as someone who had to train teenagers trying to work in the library and didn't know their alphabet and didn't know their numbers, so they couldn't figure out the Dewey Decimal System.
Right.
And wanted a break after every single 15 minutes that they actually had to do something.
Yeah.
But do you think that's another one of the efforts to push women out of the workplace and back home? They're trying, even Vance just said 3 days ago that he didn't think women should be able to vote. Yes, I know.
More response?
Yeah, that's a big one. So first, starting with the homeschool, I'm sure that there are folks who are capable and are doing the best and have the best interests of their child at heart. I would have loved to homeschool my children. That would have been tons of fun and exciting, and but I was also trained and equipped to do that, right? I think that there are places for it. You know, if you have a child actor, an athlete, right? But typically they will hire almost like an au pair or tutor to be able to provide that education. The difference with the homeschooling under this model, it's the same as a charter, or not charter, but the voucher for private school. There isn't a requirement for accountability. The parent can choose how they want their child's progress to be monitored. It's a self-selected folder. They can choose whether they participate in the progress monitoring assessments. My question is, why is homeschooling, taking children out of the public school, all of a sudden the best answer? But during COVID, it was blamed as one of the biggest mistakes of the administration at the time, of which we are still dealing with the learning loss repercussions. And that's with having teachers provide the curriculum through digital means, right? Or in some way to those parents. And, you know, again, there are parents who know their stuff. But I taught middle grades math. And the number of times that I had parents tell me that I was inventing some sort of new math, where I would love to take credit for the decimal system, which is the basis of the metric and the monetary system. I would love to. No, I didn't. Are we asking children to understand the curriculum more? Yeah. Why is it that when you multiply 2 by 2, the number gets bigger and equals, the product is 4, but you multiply a half by half, the product is a fourth, it's smaller, right? Why is that? Can you model that as an adult, right? No, but that's what we asked our children to do. That's not new math. That is really understanding the step and why we do those processes in math and why it works out. So to your question with the women in the right to vote, I had an interaction during my campaign that actually really disturbed me, because I'm a mom of 3 daughters, and I always I've raised my daughters to, you know, to understand life is a competition. So you need to go after it. You need to do the hardest thing. You need to do the things that nobody else is willing to do, because then you're going to be able to have choice. And the worst thing in life is for somebody not to have choice in their life. My mother, my father was abusive. And what I think drove me most was seeing that she had no choice. If she left my father, right, she couldn't even apply for an apartment. I was raised in a time where she wasn't able to have a checking account on her own, right? When she got pregnant with me, she had to quit her job, right? And so when I saw the lack of choice and agency in somebody's life, that's disturbing. So only people who have had the comfort of choice could possibly say that. And I had this interaction at the Veterans Park, campaigning, having conversations, and a young woman, very comfortable lifestyle, never had to ask a husband probably to be able to write a check, or never was succumbed to a husband that could technically put her in a mental institution without her approval, which is a thing that used to happen. Came to me and said, I don't like how public schools are telling girls they can do anything they want to do. And I'm like, what do you mean by that? Because I really thought it was going to be like the transgender thing, right? You know, that they could be anything they want. I'm like, you mean like an astronaut or something, or like the president? What is it? She said, I would be okay if the right to vote was appealed for women. And so that is, and she had daughters, so that is a very real, and I don't want to be alarmist, but to even have one person one woman to not understand what's at stake to be lost, right? It's, you've lived a comfortable life. You don't know what that means when you're going to take that away. And what would be the benefit of that? Is it because many women tend to vote maybe a Democratic way? I mean, I even remember even when my mom could vote, my dad would sit at the dinner table and tell her, here, this is what you're going to fill out, right? So, I think that there is a wish to regain a certain level of control, and that may be a way. But I don't understand it, because if you think the right is very capitalist, that takes away a whole group of people who are making money and whose taxes are going to the system. So I don't know, but I did have that run in, and it is concerning. I don't have data to see how many of those folks believe that and are also homeschooling their children.
We'll go to Kurt.
Kurt is having.
Yeah.
I'm gonna lose my mind.
Kurt, and
This
then
is
Dave.
fascism.
You have to wait your turn.
This is fascism in control, don't you see it? Don't you see it? They don't value education. They don't want it. They want to destroy public education. Everything when you talk to these people, tell them this is what their goal is.
I actually think it's a little, I don't know if it's fascism. However, what I'll say is, the last 30 years, there's been a lot of competition for those white collar jobs now. Now that we've opened the playing field and expanded higher education, more people are graduating. Somebody alluded to earlier, they think the Department of Education public school is broken. Well, my grandmother didn't even finish 6th grade. My father was the only one to graduate high school with his brothers and sisters. I was the first one to go to college. Every generation, we've had an improvement. How are we saying that is not making progress, right? So I think that part of it is, right, you used to be able to, as long as you knew somebody or you came from a certain family, then you were able to have that job. You didn't have to compete for that job. That job was yours for 30 years, right? Now, where we've opened it up, where somebody who can come from poverty can go and get a chemical engineering degree, right? And now they're going to compete for that $100,000 job. I think that is part of maybe what is working here, and why there's this movement to try to convince people that college is a waste of time and money. Why is investing in yourself ever a waste of time and money? And if you look at regime changes over time, or acts of conflict or war, right? Poland, I'm Polish. One of the first things that happened in Poland when Germany invaded was they went in and they killed all of the academics. And right? Because that's, you want to wipe that out. Free thinking, education, be able to distinguish propaganda from not, right? So, my father's side was Polish, and that was something that instilled in me, because that was a scar, right? In fact, that's a racial slur, is to say you're not smart if you're Polish. So it was, education can never be taken away from you, right? They can take your money, they can take your house, they can take your job, but they cannot take the knowledge that you acquire and the skills that you learn. So when we're actively advertising, no, this is great, you don't have to do that, this is wonderful. I'm not saying that we don't need the trades, but they're acting like you don't need education for that. If you look at an electrician, you got to be like a journeyman for 6 years. That's just as hard as a college degree, right? But we're acting like, no, don't go, you could just as soon as you get out of high school, you can get that job. That is not the case. Not the case. So everything worth doing requires effort and sacrifice, right?
Right. Let's go to Dave and then Kathy R.
I didn't have any.
Oh, you had your hand. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Mark. And then Kathy R.
Oh, I got two things, because we're talking about, for the last 30 years, they've been trying to dumb down America, and that's all for control. They want to control the people, the rich want to control, and it's been a long-term plan. Okay, that's not the first thing I thought of with the voucher thing. I have seen in Missouri that the wealthy people, the white people, were given vouchers, and their kids were already going to private schools. So that helps them. They give the vouchers to a black family or a Hispanic family, and they go to the school with their voucher, and they're turned away. Oh, that's not enough.
Right.
It's all a plan to help the wealthy and the white, and segregate the race. It's a race problem.
That's why
Right,
they
when you
need
can
DEI.
choose, right, when you can choose who comes into your school, that is a real risk. I don't have data on that, but what I do have data on is after last year's budget release in terms of what was the outcome of the voucher impact in public education, I took the data on what is the median income in every county in Florida, and I took which counties received the most voucher money. And those top 5 counties were all the highest median income counties. So essentially, I see it as a tax deduction for the wealthy. However, what is capitalism going to do? They're going to raise. They already know you got that money. They're going to raise those pre-existing schools are going to raise their tuition
Yeah.
to make sure that only a certain element can
Can
get
go
in,
there, yeah.
and then maybe the others, this voucher mill where maybe the quality isn't there, right? They can come in, open doors, take your scholarship money, and then close in 3 months. What did we do then?
Kathy R., and then
My question is, again, going back to being a little bit more basic, why is it that the school board doesn't supervise all schooling? I don't understand that.
Do you mean in relation to the charter schools?
Charter schools, private schools, all of it. Like,
Yeah.
it should, to me, it seems that the school board is there to supervise all schooling.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the point of the private school, is that they're saying that they're completely separate and that they want to teach ideals that are not in line with the state curriculum. You know, that curriculum, everybody likes to think, well, it's a particular teacher choosing things. That's not the case. There's a state curriculum that is adopted. Public can actually provide input into it. Even the textbooks that we select in order to deliver that curriculum at the county level is up for public review. But the private school is, for those who want to have their child have a more religious influenced schooling. That's the whole point. And so we'd have to then provide funding and staffing in order to provide that oversight. What Flagler Schools does a really good job, though, because we're a small county and we see a lot of flux, like people ping-ponging all over the place, we want to make sure that if, and hopefully when students do come back to the public school, if they've gone out to, let's say, a charter school or a private school, that they're, have had some support in that area. So like our Title I department does a whole liaison and communicates with those schools, but they can.
What is Title I?
Sorry, Title I is so Title I, II, III, and IV were those funds that were held up last year or at the end of the school. That is money provided by the federal government in order to subsidize schools where the students are largely low income, or it's for ESOL students, so second language, English as a second language students. It also provides some funding for teacher professional development. And so some people call it a grant, but it's been around for decades, right, that we receive this money. And so we have a set of folks who work in that department who have done a great job in providing outreach, guidance, support, recommendations to the larger, well-established alternative schools, like, Imagine, Baptist. But, if as this happens and you get more and more where another thing is you could have a bunch of parents who say, you know what, Sally's mom is already staying at home. Why don't we all apply for the Family Empowerment Scholarship? We're all going to get $8,000. Sally's mom is going to go teach them all. We'll give her a salary of $50,000 a year. So everybody give her $5,000 and then we keep $3,000. And I'm going to put that in savings for whatever, or take my kid to Disneyland with it, because you're allowed to do that, right? So that's another, but we can't keep up with that many, right? As those kind of smaller pockets of educational groupings occur.
Go ahead, Eileen, is it?
Eileen, hi, yeah, hi. I was a teacher here for 35 years, and I have a lot to say about this voucher program.
She's
I
amazing.
I also follow the groups up in Jacksonville who are having a really large problem.
Mm-hmm.
There's a school up there called Bowles, and it's a very elite private school. You have to get in, and all of those students now will have vouchers. And just like this gentleman said, if you're bringing your voucher over to Bowles School, they're gonna say, sorry, it's not enough, so they don't get to keep you. I also know that as a teacher, we've had kids come back from homeschooling, charter schools, and they're right here, and they know nothing. And that's really a problem for us, because then we've got to work extra hard. We need the Title I, we have all this stuff, we have extra teachers that come in and help. In Flagler County right now, we've got Mother Seton, we've got a Baptist church, we've got a strip mall church, a strip mall school over by Dominic's Deli. We have Cornerstone, which is in Bunnell, and we have Homeschool, and we have Imagine. And there also was, a couple of years ago, there was a group of Russian people who wanted to open a school at the airport. They took everybody's money and then they closed.
That was a proposed charter school.
Correct.
So they filled out the paperwork, we had to give them the money, and then they never taught one single day.
Correct.
And we can't recoup that money.
And who takes those kids? And then, so of course, we got those kids. So, and that's why I'm glad I came here, because I wanted to find out. My mom from New York, both my parents were teachers in New York City, and my mother was a special ed teacher, and just like Janie said, that, if you have a child that has a disability, and that school that happened to be in West Islip couldn't handle that type of a disability, West Islip we have that too. If we have a child with a disability who's at Belterre and they can't take it, but we bus them private. We have a single bus that goes there. These charter schools and publics and these schools that I just listed don't have to do that. They don't have to accept you. Students that have speech, also she talked about Title I. So I would consider it more like Head Start, because I'm from New York and I know what Head Start is like for low income, maybe disabled children that have language delays. What it does is it helps them get ready for kindergarten. Janie's kids and my kids we have our, they're gonna go to kindergarten and they're gonna be ready. They might have gone to daycare, but you've got kids that have stayed home with grandma or might have a disability or something, and that's what this extra money does, and it's really, really important. So I'm glad I'm here, and I'm really grateful for Janie being on our school board, because I just know from teaching school that I've had kids who have come from, really hard situations, and this is the great equalizer. I'm still friends on Facebook with some of my students, and they've done wonderful things, and they would not be able to do that, know. So anyway, thanks for doing it.
No, and her passion is evident. I agree with you, right? Like, that's what I was alluding to earlier, is that, in other societies, it's still very caste-like, right? Where you're born into that strata is where you will stay. And part of America that makes it awesome is that anybody has a potential if they're willing to work hard at it, and make something of themselves. But the foundation of that is education, right? And if we're going to make that, if public schools become the only option if you can't afford the other options, or they don't welcome you into that school, what happens? What happens in that future?
Let's go to Mark and then Kathy.
Yeah, Mark hasn't said anything.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure all
Great
of us
questions.
have many more questions. We have time. You've been in that seat for a year now.
Close to it.
Congratulations
Yeah.
on your success of all of, as Mark knows and others, running with a proud D next to you as a challenge. And you beat the odds and got there. With the transitional elements that are going on from this governor all the way down to the city council, and you never know what's happening, what is your biggest fear of what's happening with the school board existence and education in Flagler County as you see it? Sitting there, we all unfortunately get piecemeal information through Facebook or talking to parents, and we have this perception and the voucher, and it's all becoming so zero local control. Like even with our city council complains every meeting, they no longer have the authority to do things. And I know the school board is faced with the same thing. You talk about what's teaching, and you guys didn't have anything to do with the voucher. That came from our conservative state government.
Are you talking about the dismantling of the Department of Education specifically?
Yeah, but each state
Yeah.
still has its own. My kids graduated and went through Washington State, a very liberal. No kid can be funded or go from grade to grade without a check valuation, whether it be from you teaching your own daughter to an Imagine school or to a public school. So what we had there was accountability
Right.
and the belief that the goal of every student, which we don't have here, you have no say of how, if we in this room wanted to develop a school, we could do so, and we could make Mark the principal and Kathy the secretary and have no credentials. But I think what I'd like to hear from you is, what's next? What is your biggest concern? What is it that we as citizens in Flagler County and grandparents and parents need to be aware? What's scaring you for the next couple of years?
So if I were to funnel it to things that the community members should know is, first and foremost, what I would hope is that the transitions that are about to take place on the school board, as you're aware of, Mr. Bars has, it's a matter of time before he moves on to that post at Washington DC with the Transportation Department. I really felt it was a travesty that when the previous school board member stepped down, that there was an appointment not allowing the voice of the community. I am worried that if there are future transitions out of sync with election cycles, that will continue to be a pattern in order to craft the makeup of a school board that folks wish. I would have loved to see a bigger brouhaha about the voice being taken away, and an appetite to figure out, okay, do we need to change that piece? So I think the second thing is at the end of the legislative session last year in Tallahassee, I know a lot of people thought, well, they weren't effective, they didn't finish everything. But I actually thank God that they didn't, because there were a lot of measures that were in the queue that, again, right, like you were saying, I don't know the difference between voucher and public and private and all of this. And things have become so technical, it's easy to take a phrase and change it. And folks can't, it's really hard, right? Unless you're in that system. It's hard for me, even being connected for 20 years. But there were some measures that would make it easier to turn already existing public schools into charter schools. For example, parents could call a meeting, and and as long as it were advertised, wouldn't matter if there were only 10 parents who showed up. If the majority of the parents at that meeting made that vote, then it would be turned into a charter school.
Oh my God.
So that is something to be aware of. As we move in this new future where they will dismantle the DOE, one of my fears is that, again, folks are not understanding the power of what the DOE did in making sure that our most vulnerable students had the services and resources that they needed through those fundings and laws, really. If that goes away and that's under state control, do we have the established laws and policies that will continue to protect those students? Because even a teacher with their best wishes or a school with the best wishes, if in the end they don't give a para to change that child's diaper, we have children who need to have catheters, right? So if that doesn't happen, where are we going to be? Or they reduce our budget to the extent that we can't transport that child who is blind, who needs to go to the St. Augustine School for the Deaf and Blind, and we usually drive them and meet them at the county line. We now don't even have that money to do that, right? What's going to happen to those most vulnerable populations when we move to a completely state oversight control? And I think the last item is that, in dealing with the teacher shortage, really, why is there a teacher shortage? It's because we don't pay them, right?
Or respect them.
Right.
I did
We don't value
Who
education.
wants to put up with the abuse?
Yeah.
So what's happened is that we are having to lower the requirements in order to meet the standard to be in a classroom. And I don't think there's anything wrong with an alternative track to becoming a teacher. That's my original vocation was not teaching, but I went back, earned that degree, took additional courses to make that up. But now we have folks who are in the classrooms that have never had one single class about how to manage students or the art and science of teaching. We want them to come to be teachers if they want to be teachers, but we need the funding in order to prepare them. And as if we continue to degrade the pay, and I know that our current leadership will tout that that teacher pay is the highest it's ever been. They have done an immense job in increasing the salary for the first year teacher. But I worry that they don't allow us to increase salaries beyond that because they don't really want teachers to stay past 5 years. They don't want to have a larger pool in the Florida retirement system. It's one of the last vocations that actually has a pension. So as they move, there's going to be this talk of, well, hey, everybody can be a teacher. Let's welcome them in. And I agree with that as long as we have the standards there, the preparation there. But in the end, we wouldn't have this demand issue if we paid our teachers, even the pay that we give them. Okay, so let's say that you work 20 years in this county and you now make $70,000 a year. If you wanted health insurance for your family, you now only make $53,000 a year. That's how much the medical premiums cost in this county. And I did a lot to fight that. I fought to have a lower standard. Basically, it's a hit by a bust insurance, but at least it's much more affordable, and trying to increase the amount of the contribution for families because if we have families, our rates will go down because children rarely get sick. So we're trying some different strategies, but you would be shocked at the number of our educators who are using the state Healthy Kids program. So what happens is essentially you have to be in a certain income bracket, and it's they will charge you based upon that income. But the disadvantage is there that if like me, I have 3 children. Every child has a different deductible amount, right? So they're paying an amount, and that deductible, let's say kid number 1, their deductible is $5,000. Something terrible happens if they're in a car accident, and all 3, that's $15,000, right? That they're going to be hit. That's something that could bankrupt a teacher. So it's really it's embarrassing that we have folks who are college educated, who are caring for our most vulnerable in our society, who are cultivating the minds in order for our economy and our democracy to thrive, cannot participate in a healthcare system without essentially deciding to cut their salary by a third, right? And just to give you a perspective, 20 years to be a teacher and you're making $70,000 a year. Some people might think that's a lot of money. That is still less than the median income in Flagler County. And, an average college graduate now, in their first year, they're starting at about $65,000 to $70,000. So to take 20 years to get there is outrageous. And what they did to the salary schedule is a first-year teacher makes $49,000. Technically, according to that salary schedule, you don't get a raise until 9 years.
Ooh.
The reason is because we can't afford it as a county. If we increased their salary every year after that, 83% of our budget goes to salaries. We would not be able to have the teachers we have.
And they got rid of tenure, right?
They got rid of tenure. For some were grandfathered in, but what we're not allowed, we are handcuffed to provide salary increases only in so that they are tied to performance-based pay, right. And that if I were to say, well, you teachers who are 15 years or greater, we really want to retain your knowledge and your expertise. I want to increase your salary by 20% just to make it more on a level playing field. I can't do that without also raising the salary of those folks who are on that performance pay plan. And so they've kind of handcuffed us there in order to do that. And so that means we're relegated to only providing a 1 or 2% increase every year because we have to give the same amount to everybody.
If you go to the school board website and look for the school board members, you can find Janie's email, and you can email her and ask her to come back again, because we have a lot more to talk about, and we're grateful and want to thank you for
Thank you so much for hosting. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. We'll all be back here next week. You're welcome to join us again next week. You're welcome to join us anytime. Thank you. Again, we have so much more to talk about.
My pleasure.
Thank you all, and next week we'll do it again. Excellent. Excellent. You come back and do it again.
Great question.
Okay.
I'm glad I did that.
Thanks for